Hello everybody. Today we will discuss about the Bryophytes, anatomy of the adaptation and its colonization pattern. This is for FYGUP first sem Botany Major students. I am Gyandaviram Sutia, who is the Department of Botany, Durham College. The Bryophytes is a traditional name which is used to refer to all land plants that do not have true vascular bundle, and therefore they are called non-vascular plants. They do not have wood to lend them structural support, nor do they have large leaves or showy cones or flowers. And these bryophytes are gametophytic dominant, meaning that the more prominent, longer-lived plant is the haploid gametophyte. The diploid sporophytes appear only occasionally and remain attached to and nutritionally dependent on the gametophyte. This is a very brief story of the bryophytes and its type. But let me share one very beautiful thing about bryophytes is that the bryophytes were the first land plants, and rather when they arrived on the land was entirely yellow. The planet was yellow in color, and what we call as yellow planet, and there was nothing on the land surface at that time. The bryophytes, which are supposed to be evolved from the algae. The algae basically they lived in water, or their adaptation was basically water, though later on certain terrestrial algae were found. But their immediate ancestor of the bryophytes are supposed to be algae. And the algae were basically the water-loving plants or the aquatic plants. So with the advent of time, the bryophytes, they had to come to the land and they had to inhabit and colonize on the land surface. For that, it is presumed that the bryophytes, they actually basically gave the land plants the basic architectural design for its adaptation, and which has evolved to the highest modern types of plants, which we call as angiosperms these days. So akin to the angiosperms, there are certain natures and characters which are observed in the bryophytes also, but whatever we observe in the bryophytes, they're very obscure, or rather very much in its initial stage of development. Basically, the bryophytes, we define them in three classes, that is the liverworts, moss, and the hornworts. The bryophytes, they have basically they do not have any specialized tissue for transportation of water and dissolved food throughout the system, and that limits the terrestrial forms to being very short plant. And since they didn't have more advanced structures like what we see in the higher plants, like their roots for absorption of water, or we find the vascular bundle for transportation of water and the food meters. Since these bryophytes didn't have that amount of advancement in their anatomical features, they had only very less developed rhizoids. And these rhizoids were anatomically very much simple, and they were utilized for absorption of the minerals or the water from the soil surface by basic osmosis and diffusions from the surface moisture of the soil. And these are relatively, the rhizoids which we find in the bryophytes, they're relatively very simple. But sometimes we find certain multicellular filaments of thin-walled cells. This is a very beautiful bryophyte which we observe, that is Merkensia polymorpha, if we look at the structure, then we will see these are Antheridius and Archegoniophores, and this is the thallus body of the Merkensia. So we observe, I have already referred earlier that the most algae are aquatic in habitat, while some adapt to the terrestrial habitat. And being the primitive land plants, the bryophytes, they move from water to land. And when they move from the water to land, it's not absolute because their male gametes are still motile, and they had to swim through a film of water to fertilize the egg. This is one of the main conclusion or scientific presumption that the bryophytes, they had an option of, or rather they were very much related to their what we understand as their aquatic habitat being the basic feature of fertilization, where we find that the male gametes, they will be motile, and they had to swim through a film of water to fertilize the egg. And this makes them basically the bryophytes. They are amphibians, what we observe in the animal kingdom. So the scientists believe that the land plants might have originated from freshwater green algal ancestors, although there are no fossil records available to substantiate this belief. But it has been observed in due course of observation and a lot of scientific endeavors that few structural and biochemical characteristics with algae are similar to that of bryophytes, and which supports our view that the bryophytes, they develop from the algae. The first one is the chloroplast of bryophytes have chlorophyll and carotenoid pigments closely similar to green algae. But at this point of time, let me refer to one very interesting fact, that the chloroplast of algae, it was of different types. Rather, we observed that F.E. Fritsch in 1945, he classified the algae basing on their pigmentation and the structure of the chloroplast. But if we look at the structure of the chloroplast in the bryophytes, then we will observe that the chloroplast is oval in shape, and what we find in the higher plants. So from this point, we can derive one interesting fact, that the higher plants, where we find the chloroplast to be oval in shape, that particular structural design was first given by the bryophytes. Rather, in due course of time, this was the type of chloroplast which would be prominently found in the higher plants. Here, since they had these chlorophyll and carotenoid pigments closely similar to the green algae, so it envisages one very interesting fact, that the food reserve would be amylose and amylopectin. And this is also similar to the physiological processes of assimilation of products in the higher plants. So it is a crossbound, these bryophytes maintain a crossbound lineage between the algae and the higher plants, the bryophytes in between them. The relation of bryophytes to that of the algae can be further observed by their flagellated motile spermatozoids. And these spermatozoids will have a whipless type of flagella, which is very commonly observed in the algae. Here, the cell wall will be containing pectin and cellulose components, and which is also found in the higher plants, as we find in algae, and it is also found in the bryophytes. So this particular fact gave us one idea that the composition of the cell wall, by virtue of the presence of pectin and cellulosic compounds, is actually pulling us to a new horizon of construction of the cell wall of the higher plants. The glycolytic pathway, on the other hand, is quite similar in the green algae and that of the Bryophytes. And maybe this glycolytic pathway was established as a basic fundamental biochemical pathway in the higher plants. So with these few observations, we feel that the bryophytes they have been developing from the algae, and on the other hand, they gave certain architectural as well as biochemical designs for the higher plants to succeed on the planet Earth. So these are certain of the strong reasons to believe that green algae served as ancestors to the bryophytes. Uh, in In pursuance of this fact, let us observe a simple TS of the Mercansia tellus. Then we will observe that the tellus, which is not finely differentiated, rather, if we make it transverse section of the Mercansia tellus, then we will observe that the there is an upper photosynthetic tissue zone, and which corresponds to the dorsal surface, and lower storage zone corresponds to the ventral surface. Now, if you look at the upper region of the Mercansia tellus, then you will observe that the upper part has pores, and these pores are will have linearly arranged, somewhat dichotomously branched photosynthetic tissues, and they will be demarcated by some type of sterile linearly arranged cells. And the ventral side of the tissues will be chlorophyllous, parenchymatous, and will have several layered partitions. This anatomical feature give us a new idea on the development of the photosynthetic tissues and their presence on the higher plants. Now, if you look at this particular diagram very minutely, then we will observe, then we find a air pore here, and this air pore is encircled by certain types of stomatal pore-like structures. And here, this actually facilitates the exchange of gases. On the upper hand, these air pores, they are on the upper epidermis, stationed on the upper epidermis, as we find in the higher plants. On the other hand, the photosynthetic tissues are specialized here, what we call as photosynthetic filaments. And maybe this the genetic makeup of this formation of the photosynthetic filament in due course of time has given rise to what we find as the mesophyll cells, or the spongy leafy tissues in the later part of the development of the plants. On the other hand, since these plants didn't have any type of vascular bundles, so they had to store the food products which were synthesized, and they were synthesized immediately below the upper portion of the thallus, and they were necessitizedly called as storage cells, and it will have certain mucilage containing cells, maybe certain types of lipid molecules, or certain types of other secondary metabolites could be stored here. And the lower portion was which is not chlorophyllous. The ventral side is acrophylous rather, and it will be parenchymatous in nature. And this envisages one point, that in higher plants we find that the parenchymatous tissues are on the which helps to grow the girth of the plant or the height of the plant, and they will have different layers of partitions. So with these few observations, we can come to one fact, that the bryophytes, they evolved from the algae. And though they evolved from the algae, they were the first land plants which tried to colonize the Earth's surface. And they did that following in mind certain types of architectural design and morphological as well as physiological designs for the future days to come, which will relate to the development of the new plants. This is all about the bryophytes, its anatomy and its developmental design, for which paved the way for the higher plants. Thank you so much.